thought it would be important to include a good range, something that represented not just the people who make use of this service, like myself. I'm a mother of 3. This is a really personal issue for me. When I first moved to this region, it took me almost a year to find a high quality childcare service. And I know that I have access to resources. So I can imagine how much of a challenge it is for women who are working parents in the region who are doing it by themselves, who have less disposable cash available to them or less information. And so we thought it would just be really key to revisit this this topic. This Thrive Inland SoCal is sponsoring this event, and that is because Thrive, which is a regional investment initiative that has been going on for the last 18 months, is really focused on gathering information from the broad community about what we need here in the IE to move our region forward economically. And that means providing more high quality, what we call good jobs for more residents in our region and what that looks like. But what we've learned, one of the privileges that I have had since I have taken on this role as Director of Public of Programs and Outreach for the Institute, is I have had the privilege of being able to travel throughout the region and really talk to workers about what it is that they think is a barrier to their thriving in our region. And over and over and over again, childcare reemerged as a major issue across unions, across sectors, across genders, and then other characteristics. So thank you for helping us to tackle this really important issue. And I want to quickly introduce you to the folks that we have here on the panel available to us to kick us off with this topic. So we have the amazing Joanne Barnes, who is a 30-year veteran of the ATU, the transit union in our region, and she is also the union president, and she supported many operators over the years who are also working parents in desperate need of high quality childcare. And something that she really brought to our attention at the Institute is we have many workers, especially in the IE, because this is really a place-based kind of conversation. We want to make sure that we're not talking about childcare in just broad terms, but how does it work for the Inland Empire in particular? And so what she has really brought to us is let us know that there are many, many workers that we value in this region that have unusual schedules that they are subject to. Maybe they're working late at night, or they start at 3 a.m. in the morning. What are the options for those workers in our region? So thank you, Ms. Joanne Burns, for being here. Tanya Burke is the Associate Dean of Mount San Jacinto College, and she is kind of a mentor of mine because she's got so much going on all the time in our region when it comes to building pathways to better jobs. She is growing in innovating around new training programs, and she is actually working with early childhood education right now in developing a track for high-paid jobs in this sector. So we thought it would be very important for her to join the panel. So she's with us today. Next to her, we have Ms. Sheba Marks. Now, Shiva I know personally because she's actually she's supported my family in particular, taking care of my little ones, but she is also a small business owner and CEO of a consulting firm that works with home-based providers. They are a really key piece of this conversation. When we're talking about child care, it's not just about what's happening at major child care centers, but it's also what's happening with the folks who are providing child care service through their homes. And so So I thought it would be awesome for her. And she's done this work for 25 years in this space, so she's got a lot to offer to the conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Marks. And last and certainly not least is James Moses, who is the Regional Director of the Childcare Resource Network. And he's got over 35 years of experience in the childcare industry, and he's been a tireless advocate for quality childcare in our region. If any of you have been working in this field, you know him. You have interacted with him. And I've learned so much just from knowing him from a very short period of time, being in a space with him. He's got a real handle on what is happening around the policy landscape related to child care. So I thought he could bring a wealth of knowledge to this conversation. And with that said, I'm going to leave our last introduction for Ms. Vanessa. She's going to introduce our moderator for us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today at KVCR Public Media. We are honored to be able to have the privilege to work with you to be part of this conversation and dialogue on this really important topic. Many of you may already know the moderator, Connie Leyva, who was formerly a state senator for 8 years, who chaired the Women's Caucus, where they led a lot of policy initiatives to address a lot of what's going to be discussed today. But we know that it's an ongoing issue and it's something that's very near and close to her heart. Connie Leyva, who I always refer to as still Senator Leyva, is the current executive director here at KVCR. She's been here for 2 years now. December 5th was her anniversary, and she's really tasked the staff with becoming more connected with the community, with the business community, the nonprofit community, the labor community, and that encouragement from her and that leadership really led us to this day, because we met with Esmeralda, we met with Fatima, and we thought, if you're gonna have this type of conversation and this type of event, we'd love to be the host. We'd love to convene, we'd love to have you there, have you here to continue this discussion and to be a partner in it. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Connie Leyva, Executive Director of KVCR Public Media.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? All right, that sounds pretty okay. All right, maybe we need a little more coffee or something. I too want to welcome you to KVCR Public Media. How many of you before today knew we were here? A couple. Vanessa is right. One of the things I've tasked all of us with doing is making sure that we're putting the public back in public media and making sure people know that we are here. I want to thank Fatima for asking me to be the moderator. As Vanessa said, this issue is near and dear to my heart. My husband and I have 32-year-old twins, so they're pretty easy now, right? But when they were 2 and I went back to work at UFCW Local 1428, I said, yes, right? Woo-woo. Hi, Diana. I didn't even see you. Nice to see you. I remember those days. I remember, dropping them off, having a reliable place to take my children so I, as a woman, could have my own job, make my own money. Childcare is an issue for everyone, but it predominantly falls to women. It predominantly falls to mom, right? If we want moms to be able to work, we need to make sure they have a place that's affordable but safe, so that when you drop your children off, you're not worried about them. You're not wondering what's happening. Are they going to be okay? And for those of you who are doing this or have done it, how about when you're leaving work? I knew exactly the minute I had to leave to get to childcare by 6 o'clock, because if I was late, it's $1 a minute. and we were broke, and we didn't have a buck a minute. And I remember my husband drove for Budweiser. He was a salesman, and he had a van, but the van only had 2 seats, and the rest was for product. So sometimes I'd call him, I'd be like, Albert, Leyva, I need you to get over to Creative Kids. I will meet you in the parking lot, sit there with our girls so I can get there so we don't have to pay the $20 because I'm late. So I remember that like it was yesterday. So we know that parents are going through this every day in this region, and we know how incredibly expensive it is. So with that, we have some questions we're going to ask our panelists, and we are going to maybe not solve all the problems of the world today, but we're going to get a good start. And we want to hear from all of you too as to how you think we can do a better job. So the first question we're going to ask, I'm going to ask it of each of you, and we'll go in different order so everybody has a chance to be the first and to be the last. First question is, what is the biggest challenge for working parents related to childcare, and how can we do a better job in addressing that issue or those issues? James, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Connie. It's hard to say like one biggest challenge. I think there's a lot of challenges that parents are facing, right? In San Bernardino and Riverside counties, we have a lack of childcare spaces available. So our entire counties are both deserts. So that's a big challenge for parents. Mm-hmm. The cost of childcare has risen incredibly over the last 4 to 5 years. And that cost, while it's challenging for parents to be able to afford that, and we've made a lot of headway in terms of state reimbursements that help offset that cost, we still have a situation where many of our teachers are underpaid. And so because teachers are underpaid, then we have a teacher shortage, and we have a lack of teachers. So we have classrooms that are funded by the state that we can't put children in because we don't have teachers. So those are some big challenges. I think also when you think about the broader community, helping the broader community understanding what childcare is, because the broader community doesn't understand the educational components that a family childcare provider or a private childcare center provide. They don't understand that those educational components look different from what they might see in the TK-12 world, but they're not any less important. That social emotional development is absolutely critical, and you see a big part of that is the focus in child care centers and family child care homes. I think those are a few that I see as major problems for us.
Very good, thank you. Sheba.
So, when I had my first child, I was ecstatic. This was the best thing that was ever happening, and it was so amazing. But then when I found out the cost of childcare, I thought, did I make a mistake by having this kid? It was astronomical for me, someone making $10.25 an hour. How was I going to afford sending my child to a place to where they could be cared for while I went to work? And it really became for me and my husband to where it was, we were really sending our child away just to go make enough money to send our child away. That was pretty much it at the end of the day. So I strongly believe that still to this day, one of the biggest challenges is the cost of childcare. And with the reason, because I want people to understand, like with the cost of childcare, there's so many other things that are in place. Like it was just mentioned, being able to have quality teachers and certified teachers to come in and take care of your children. They are not looking to make not even $20 an hour. They want to even get paid more than that. And then, you know, the different things that go into making sure that you have a quality program for kids, whether it's in center-based or private care, in-home care. And then another thing is, not everyone works a 9 to 5. That's not everyone's schedule. So being able to accommodate those people who may, you know, a lot of them are like in the field of like service, to where it's the doctors, it's the police officers, the nurses and things like that, to where they have like these, and also a lot of times too, like the warehouse workers, they have these off-kiltered kind of schedules to where they still need childcare. And what we have found as childcare providers, I know I can speak for myself, is that, there's so much that we're giving up as a result to cater to these other time slots that are needed by families, to where sometimes, I know for me, I have to schedule a teacher to come in and work those later hours so that we can still accommodate these families, because my kids have baseball and they have spelling bees and they have other things that they're involved in that, I want to make sure that I'm a part of. And so it does take a toll on the cost that it takes in order to run a successful and thriving and equitable child care facility for families to bring their kids to.
Thank you, Sheba. Tanya?
Well, like Sheba, being a mother of 3, all my kids are grown though. They're grown and gone. But I do have grandchildren. But the unfortunate piece to this is the biggest challenge today is the same challenges that we had when my children were young.
That's right.
My oldest is 30 and my youngest is 22. My youngest is a teacher. And for her to be an educator and she has to worry about who's going to watch her child,
Yep.
and not even making enough to make sure that she can adequately, try to have her child in childcare while she's educating our children. And that's one of the challenges that we continue to see on and on and on over the years. And you would think the fortunate piece would be about it is because it has been going on for so long, we would have some solutions to the issues. And so I think that until we begin to recognize, and like I said, who's watching, I see so many students who come our way who are often stressed at the fact of, okay, I need to go to school. I want to go to school. I want to be in this industry, but I don't have anyone to watch my children, and I can't afford someone to watch my children. And then to hear childcare providers say, I don't even make enough for someone to watch my child. And so until we start tackling those issues and making sure that our providers are making a fair wage, not asking them to get Rockefeller money, but Rockefeller could come and give some money to some of these folks. But until we start to really address how do we make sure that our providers who are taking care of our children, who really are taking in the charge when we're not able to be there with our children, until we really tackle that piece, we're going to continue to be having this conversation for the next couple decades.
Absolutely. Joanne, thoughts?
Everything they just said. But no, it's, again, like most of them are saying, my kids is grown, my oldest is 42, so don't be trying to add nothing but
That's common core math.
the most important thing is trust. You got to be able to trust the people that you're leaving your kids with. And if you have a facility that you can't trust, it's an uncomfortable thing. I work with bus drivers, and so to be out there driving, wondering if my kid is okay, I think our most challenges is having trust, and like they said, it's the quality of what you receive. And so, again, it's like this has been going on for years. When I started out, with the buses, my kids were in elementary school. So it's like the same thing is still going. There should be something by now that's more reasonable, that we can leave our kids, or, we're able to do what we have to do and get it done. But if you don't have that quality childcare, and I'm dealing with it now with other younger parents that's coming in, so it's a lot.
It's a lot. So what did we hear? We heard that the barriers are cost. I think that's probably one of the number one reasons. And how do we take care of these teachers? When I started in the Senate, I was on the Senate Education Committee for the 8 years I was there, and I remember Senator Ben Allen, good guy, but he was the chair of the Senate Ed at the time, and he said, well, you know what we need to do? We need to require these child care providers to get 4-year degrees. We need to make sure that they have a bachelor's degree. I said, are you out of your cotton picking mind? I said, we already require so much of these women. 98% of childcare providers are women, and we pay them peanuts, and now you're going to ask them to incur debt. And you know, a lot of times it's having the conversations, because as soon as I said it, he goes, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I know you didn't, because you have a wife, and she's taking care of the childcare issues. You're coming to Sacramento every week. So how do we make sure that these women are making a livable wage so that we can bring them in to watch our most precious things, our children and our grandchildren? We can't just see it as women's work. We have to see it as societal work. So cost, teachers are not paid enough, and then I couldn't agree more about the alternative work schedules. Back when I was in the labor movement, I remember there was a gentleman, we represented grocery store workers, and he worked the overnight shift, midnight to 8, because he left his 7, his 5, and his 2-year-old children at home asleep because he had no child care. That is, I learned that almost 30 years ago, and it has stayed with me because I cannot imagine as a parent having to do that. But people do what they need to do so that they can go to work. So I'm taking notes. I hope all of you are taking notes, because at the end, we're going to try and come up with some solutions. All right, next question. We're going to start with you, Sheba. What are the most promising models for childcare that you have seen or you have experienced, especially as a childcare provider yourself?
Really just making yourself more accessible to these families. So like some of the things that we implemented was, you know, those alternate schedules for families, as well as having resources within the agency to help the families when they come to you. And also, like, because as a daycare provider, you can't do it all yourself, so you have to kind of network and kind of outsource some things to be able to really accommodate and meet the needs of the families that come into your care. So like having someone that's researching continually different resources that can be brought into the agency to help the families when the need arises, as well as, and I can only speak for myself, because I saw there was such a need for childcare and just the disparity as to what people were making and what childcare costs, just taking out of our own resources, me and my family's resources, to make a scholarship fund available for if you get a family that comes in that absolutely are in need of the care, but they make $1 more than what they should to, you know, qualify for CCRC or RCOE or some of these other government agencies, or state agencies, to where, you know, for a period of time, we can support them and still give them the care that they need. So, you know, being more available for the schedules that they need, making more financial provisions available for these families, even if it is private financial provisions that's being made for them, and then also having resources for these families beyond just, you know, being able to take care of their kids, but really taking care of the whole family. And I know sometimes that's a lot for, you know, for you to think about taking on, but in this field, like, I have learned that these children and these families that we are servicing, I have learned and grown so much as a result of denying myself, sacrificing some so that we can be there for someone else. And it's such a rewarding experience to be able to take a family who has had a traumatic experience with childcare and to bring them into your setting and just love and nurture and really build them back up to a place to where they have the confidence to know that people can be trusted and their children can be safe, and really just being able to see them progress from that.
Thank you. And Sheba, if I can ask you, because you're our only child care actual provider here on the panel, if I, as a parent, came to you and said, I need care midnight to 8 because I'm going to be working overnight, would you personally be able to help them, or would you refer them to someone else? What does that look like?
Well, first, because I'm a married woman, I'd have to ask my husband.
Say, favorite husband, can you help me out here?
But, you know, that's one thing that I just kind of still am really working with. Just, I know we can't help everyone as
That's right.
providers.
That's right. Okay.
We really can't, but just making sure that if I can't, that's what those resources are for.
You can
So
find
really
someone
making
who
sure to
can.
network and know at least 2 or 3 other daycare providers that do offer 24-hour care, that
There you
you've
go.
actually taken the time to go in, maybe do some observations,
Mm-hmm.
or are working with them to mentor their program, so that you know that you're not sending that child to some
A bad-
foreign, bad space.
Right.
But something that you would take your own kids to.
Perfect. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but how do we're looking at how do we do alternative work schedules? Because we know so many people don't work 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatnot. Tanya, what do you think are some promising models maybe that you have seen or heard about in childcare?
Some of the promising models in childcare, and especially on the side of education, is as we heard from Governor Newsom, he has a charge of creating, 500,000 apprenticeships in the next couple years. I think 2029 is the goal. But some of the models in terms of education has been apprenticeship programs that are now springing up in childcare and teacher education. And the reason why it's so great, because like you said, this is usually a female's game, a woman's game. And oftentimes when we as mothers, we go back to school, or we decide, okay, I'm going to go to school, usually we're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for our families.
That's true.
And we go back, and usually we have to go, and sometimes people don't go back because they have to make a choice.
That's right.
Either I'm going to go to school or I'm going to go to work. I can't do both. And that's what's so great about the apprenticeship model, because now it allows our future providers to be able to go to school and work at the same time, and build up their portfolio of employment, to where that no matter what route they want to go, they can go and also earn money at the same time. So those, in terms of education within the child care industry, I think that's one of the best models that I'm seeing today.
Excellent. Thank you. Joanne, thoughts on models you've seen for childcare that work or would like to see?
Going back to my day, we had, the mothers used to come and help us, but now grandma's working. And so that was like a very big help for us. And so if we have family members that can help, it's great, but there's a lot of people out there that don't. And so some of the promising things is that to maybe get with some of these jobs and, possibly give out vouchers to help with childcare, and, just do something that's going to inspire people that, hey, I can work, I can have childcare, and I can take care of my family. And so I think it's just kind of like just instilling in people that we need to help each other. And that's the main thing. And it's like everybody now is kind of like stuck in their own ways, and I'm gonna take care of me and mines. And it's like if we kind of got together as a community, hey, I'm at home all day, I can watch your kid, or I can help out. So I think just kind of helping out and getting to know our neighbors, because I know now we don't even know our neighbors no more.
So true. Thank you. James, I'm going to go
discounts to attend this child care center, which was a very high quality, and still is a very high quality center. And as kind of in what they did for the provider was the provider received space at a very reduced rate for rent or lease. And I don't know the exact amount, but almost like, where you'd have this $1 a year lease, and then here's what you're going to do for our employees. They were also open to the public, but it was specific for city and county employees. That was the focus, and that had worked well for many years. That partnership no longer exists. Teddy Bear Times is still there and does a wonderful job, but the partnership's gone. I think another one is, we've seen when we have housing developments being built, is adding childcare spaces or community center spaces into these housing developments. I think one of the challenges I've seen this work is that often, like at the county level, they want to engage a county entity to provide the childcare. So like in San Bernardino County, we have preschool services department. That's an excellent organization. Provide Head Start, early Head Start. They also have state preschool and general childcare. They tend to operate, though, in a regular workday, and we've talked about the need for alternative care. Many of our private providers can offer care later into the evenings and on the weekends, and I think we need to, when we look at these kind of partnerships with housing models that the city or the county often are involved in, is look outside of the city or the county, but let's look at our private childcare providers and what they bring to the table. They often can provide as good or better services in some ways than some of our county or city entities. And also then we're promoting small business, we're promoting our economy. The other models we've seen work is where businesses begin to support employees related to childcare costs, and we've seen that done a number of ways. We've seen businesses that put a childcare center on their property, on their premises. Parents or employees bring their children into the childcare center that's on the property. So we've seen that with a few larger businesses. We're also starting to see models where businesses are providing support to their employees, but through, for example, a childcare alternative payment program like Childcare Resource Center, and we're also a resource and referral network. So if this business, it has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, well, the R&Rs can help you find that 24-hour care. So the question you mentioned, our providers often know of other providers who do provide it, but a place that we can always go to is the local resource and referral for childcare in each county. They have a list of all of the providers that provide that 24/7 care. So I'd like to see more of some of these models being acted on and expanded. I think there's a lot of opportunity for these, but we just don't, I'm not sure why we don't always have the synergy to get that done. But I know, CCRC, we're in conversations with a few different entities on all three of these areas, and hoping that we can start to make some headway to maybe start something that becomes more of a normal thing, that we do this regularly as opposed to a one-off.
Love that. Why don't we have the synergies, right? Because it's not always a lack of how to, but a lack of will to. Those of us who are older now and our children are grown, I'm still passionate about it. But sometimes people get out of that phase of their life and they're like, oh, thank goodness we're done with that. And trust me, I feel that way a little bit too, but now we got the grandkids and we got to worry about them. But the things that you brought up, Jim, are just huge, James. Housing development, making sure that they add childcare spaces. So if anybody sits on a city council or on a planning commission in your city, bring those up when they're talking about affordable housing. Why not include a childcare development center in that housing project? That's a great idea. Business support, if we could get more businesses to do the right thing, I'm looking at Ricardo. Anybody in the labor movement knows that that is sometimes just impossible. But how do we band together and get businesses to do the right thing? They're going to get better employees and they're going to get more productivity out of their employees if they have someplace safe to take their children. Okay, we're down to about 8 minutes, so we've got 2 more questions. In your opinion, what needs to happen in this space, or the space that you occupy in general, to move the needle on this topic? Tanya, we're going to start with you.
Okay, calling folks out.
Yeah, yes, calling folks out.
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, it's going to take not being shy about the issue.
That's right.
Oftentimes, we tiptoe around what's needed for our communities and what's needed, and especially when it comes to workforce, and especially when it comes to the working poor. And so it's time that we make sure that we don't shy away from asking for what we want and asking for what we need. And that starts with, folks are always into, and, I've served in politics, and so people don't understand local government means a lot. And oftentimes, our communities, people in our communities, they look for our federal government, they look for our state government, and yes, they play a part, but your local government also has
100%.
funding and resources
government.
available. You know, every city has a community block grants. Every city, you know, they have a number of different funds that are available, and also your counties. And so local government is where a lot of these conversations need to take place, because that's where it's happening. That's where the action is at.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, 100%. Joanne, thoughts on the topic?
It's
What do we need
just,
to do?
having the resources and knowing the right people to talk to, knowing the right people to get things moving. And again, it's with politics too, but again, our companies, we can help out with that and doing what we can.
I agree, absolutely. James, thoughts?
Yeah, I think some of those things that need to happen are things that we talked about, like in best practices. They happen, but they're one-offs, and we need to make those something that we consistently are looking at those opportunities to partner. I think a couple of things come to mind is, and you mentioned this, Connie, but it started with you when you were the senator. CCRC was a big part of that, is looking at how we increase the reimbursement rates for childcare providers.
Yes.
And it started with Connie's bill, SB 246, probably 8 years ago. That's where we started to get momentum, and it took a long time. We had to move that more recently. Eloise Gomez-Reyes took that on, as well as Senator Monique Limon. And we have seen a commitment to a new reimbursement rate model that will pay on the cost of quality care. And this has helped some organizations be able to pay teachers a higher wage, but not all. We have to realize that the cost of providing that care has gone up enormously. Just like all the costs we pay as a running our families, the cost of food, the cost of rent, the cost of milk, the cost of diapers, everything's gone up. So it's expensive to run a child care center. I think we need to understand that reimbursement rates don't necessarily mean greater wages for staff. And they don't always transition. That doesn't always translate into family child care programs as well, and we need to be aware of that. So I think we need to look at teacher pay, family child care provider pay, and how do we increase that, maybe separate and apart from the rates. I think the other thing we need to look at to help families is things have gotten so expensive, especially in California, that we have families that either don't qualify income from an income eligible perspective, don't qualify as an income eligible family, or they make, even though they qualify, they make just enough that there's thousands of families ahead of them on a wait list. So in San Bernardino County alone, we just cleared our wait list probably 10 months ago with all the money that the state gave us for
Congratulations,
alternative payment.
that's a big deal. We can clap for that.
That is a big deal, because we had about 30,000 kids on the wait list just for San Bernardino County. But in 10 months now, we have 15,000 more kids on the wait list in the last 10 months. Now, we did, a blessing for us, we're going to receive an additional 30 million, so we'll be able to serve maybe about 1/5 or 1/6 of those kids. But we need to think about, how do we serve those families that are kind of that low to middle income that can't afford to pay for childcare? How do we create a system? I don't know whether it's a tiered system. I'm not sure what it looks like. I mean, I have my ideas, but we need to help more families get access to subsidies and financial support for childcare. We see studies all over that childcare for many families is more than their rent, it's more than college tuition. So it's a rising cost that families can't afford, and we need to figure out a way that we provide supports for them to help them.
Absolutely. So we're at time, but Fatima, I'm going to ask for 2 more minutes so that Sheba can answer, and then I'm going to ask each one of you for a 1-sentence call to action. What do you need all of us to do? But Sheba, give us your thoughts on how we move the needle on this particular issue, childcare.
So one of the biggest things I think is just the consistency. Like, we have to, once we target in on, what the issue is, staying consistent with it and not letting it just die out. Kind of like how it's been mentioned, all of you guys are like, oh yeah, my kids are older now, blah, blah, blah. But there's so many that still have young kids who are in this industry who are still in need of childcare. And I think that if Like, even if I didn't have kids, being in this field and seeing like that there are families sleeping in their cars, taking their kids to school, dropping the babies off at daycare, like, that's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
That's the choice that they have to make because that's the option that they have right now.
Yeah.
You know, so I know there's a disparity still in just what people are making and the cost of things, but I strongly believe too that if the resources are used appropriately and some of these parents are given educational tools on financial literacy and things of that nature, that they can make what they have work for them. So instead of just shoving out this money to, you know, give childcare to more people, really backing it with other support as well so that they can do it in a manner that's educating them on how to not just survive for this moment, but be victorious for a lifetime. That's really what we want to leave these families with, because just, you know, when we're just Band-Aiding things, eventually the Band-Aid's going to come off and the wound is still going to be there.
Absolutely. Consistency and financial literacy. That's a whole nother day program. So important. Okay, last question. Give me in 1 or 2 sentences, what's the call to action? What do you need all of us to do? Joanne, we're going to start with you.
Short sentence, let's work together.
Let's work together. Love that. Tanya?
It's not a their problem, it's a our problem.
Oh, love that. Absolutely. Thank you. Sheba?
Let's put ourselves in someone else's shoes.
Definitely. Yes. James?
I think understanding how important childcare is, not only to the families that need it, but to our economies and to our communities, and then advocating not just with state and federal legislators, but at our county and city levels, with our school districts, with our businesses, to really help them understand what the needs are and how they can be a part of the solution.
Absolutely. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you all very much. Your insights, I've made lots of notes. I'm not in the legislature anymore, but I feel like I can call somebody and say, hey, this is what we need to do. And to all of you for being here, the program isn't over, but we really appreciate all of your insights. And I've made, like I said, some notes. Something we didn't talk about, Jim, I know you'll appreciate this, mixed delivery. That could really change the game for a lot of people. So we'll see if we can make that happen, since I couldn't make that happen. But thank you all. We appreciate you for being here, and we appreciate what you do every day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to do a 10-minute intermission. So use the restroom, get something else to eat, and then we'll be back, and we will be having a little presentation by Angie Garling. All right?
I wanted to introduce our next presenter. Her name is Angie Garling, and she is the Vice President of Early Care and Education for the Low Income Investment Fund. We want you all to walk away with something concrete and something to think about, and we'll talk about a call to action after Angie presents, so that we can figure out what our next steps are at this point. But so happy that she is here today to share with us what her organization is doing, how they are innovating around this issue for childcare. So Angie joined the Low Income Investment Fund, or LIF, in 2019. And at LIF, she oversees the organization's national ECE footprint, or early childhood education footprint, which currently includes robust programs here in California, New York City, Washington, D.C., and most recently Atlanta as well. So through national and state policy advocacy and forging public and private partnerships that James was mentioning, those public-private partnerships, she has continued to grow this sector at LIF. And I'm so excited to hear her presentation. Thank you so much for being here, Angie. You all could give her a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. I really appreciate it. And hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. And it was great to see James, a familiar face. James and I used to have a similar position, his in San Bernardino County, I was in Alameda County. And I'm also the mom of 2 girls. One's a tween, one's a teen. But I absolutely remember those days. My childcare program closed at 5:30, not 6 o'clock. So I remember that desperate drive going like, am I gonna get there on time? Am I gonna get there on time? So I wanted to ask the rest of you, how many of you have had a childcare issue similar to this? Like, can I find it? Is it too expensive? Yeah, several of you, yeah. And then how many of you were once children? So, I feel like we all have experienced this, whether it's been us actually being children, thinking about how we felt safe, how we felt happy, how we were thriving with our families, and then as families ourselves, or even coworkers of folks who are working and, managing, their childcare needs along with, being a student or being somebody in the working world, or all of those things. So I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking to you a little bit about the work that we do at the Low Income Investment Fund. And I think I may also talk about my previous job when I was in Alameda County, because I think it's relevant. I do have a few slides. I'm going to sort of follow them, but I'm maybe not going to follow them too much. But I'm going to talk a little bit about San Bernardino and some of the work we've done in San Bernardino, a little bit about Riverside, a little bit about some work we've done in San Diego, but just to give you some examples of solutions. So, do I just say next slide? Is that how it? Fabulous. Okay, great. So our mission and vision, we really deeply believe that every person in this country deserves to live in a community of equity, opportunity, and well-being. And we really help mobilize capital and partners to make that happen. And at LIF, we're actually like a financial institution, which is very different. I've always worked for government or nonprofit. I work for Head Start. I've worked for childcare. I work for Alameda County. This is very different. We're like overseen by Treasury, the Department of the Treasury. We kind of act like a nonprofit bank, but it's been advantageous in many ways because we have a lot of bank partners, and we talk to banks about how banks can use their money better for good, to work in communities that have often been left behind and are underinvested in. So at LIF, we're really the premier organization that thinks about early care and education as a community development financial institution. We focus a lot on early care and education and on low-income housing. And we are working even more to try to combine those things. So as James had said earlier, thinking about co-location, isn't it better for families if their housing and their childcare is close together, so they don't have to drive all over the place, take more time, be on the road, all of those things. So that's a little bit about LIF. So next slide. Okay, so we have been investing in childcare for 25 years. We started out in San Francisco, and over time, we have now invested over $500 million in childcare, mostly through grants to the sector to build, expand, repair, and renovate their physical facility. So we absolutely realize that the workforce is incredibly important. You can have a beautiful facility and no teachers or no educators, and we know that there are amazing people out there working on behalf of the workforce and to advocate for the workforce, and we support those efforts. LIF's sort of sweet spot, or our wheelhouse, is working on the physical infrastructure. So, getting bids, working with contractors, overhauling your outdoor space, architectural plans. We get money from governments, cities, states, counties, and then we act as an intermediary to redistribute that to family childcare providers and childcare centers. Almost half the work that we do is with home-based childcare providers. And that's been so important to us because centers are absolutely important, but sometimes they get a little bit more of the spotlight and the attention. But we realize that family childcare providers are such amazing local businesses and community anchors. I just visited a family childcare program this morning, a family childcare program that had received a grant from us. And it was the business owner and her daughter was her main employee. So these are often family businesses. She was caring for 3 of her grandchildren and 5 other young children. And she was so grateful because the very razor thin margins that family childcare providers often operate in do not enable them to do things like fix their roof or redo their flooring. She said she'd been operating this program for 20 years and she'd had carpet and she hadn't really been able to afford to replace it. We were able to work in partnership with the California Department of Social Services to help her replace her carpet with regular flooring. She would say, she was mostly Spanish speaking, so we got along best we could, but she said, something would spill and it would just go like this in the carpet. She's like, with the floor, I could just mop up the floor. It was a lot easier. So the goal is to make these women's lives easier so they can do the important work of taking care of children and supporting families. And James, I'll also say, she said every single one of her children was a CCRC client. So, caring for a lot of low-income families that really need this service. And those family childcare providers are the ones that often have more flexible hours. They're often tend to be a better language and cultural match for the families that they're serving. And they're important, as I said, community anchors. So we really feel like we have a generational opportunity to make a difference in growing and expanding and preserving the supply of childcare across the country. And we do that through either grants, sometimes loans, working with other organizations to support their ability to give grants and loans, and then policy and advocacy, really important things. And you can see that the majority, nationally, about 40 to 45% of people who work in early care and education identify as people of color. At LIF, we serve about 80%. So we're really ensuring that we are focusing on families and communities that have often been the most under-resourced, and ensuring that those communities, our communities, can thrive. All right, next slide. So we have a project that's been mostly funded by First 5 Riverside County called Build Up Riverside County. We also at LIF have an effort called Build Up California. And what this is really designed to do is to help gather the tools necessary to make the case to build more supply in Riverside County. Very, vastly growing, large county, just like San Bernardino. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas of some of the things that we've done in Riverside. And you don't have to look at all of this, but basically what we've done is we sort of did a landscape scan. What is the supply and demand, but giving it a little bit of an extra flavor around facilities. My experience in Riverside County a couple of years ago really activated me around climate and climate change. We were doing site visits and it was June and it was 106 degrees and none of the children could go outside. And this is something that you might all be like, well, yeah. But it was really, it really struck me hard in thinking how are we designing facilities that actually are working or not working for children? If the play structure is too hot to touch, if the tricycles are too hot to touch, if the railing leading to the play yard is too hot to touch, we have to rethink what we're doing. And so we started to think about how to work with developers who are building childcare, who are building housing, to give them better ideas. Even we did these things called typologies, which is okay, if you're on a corner lot and you're gonna build 100 units of affordable housing, you're gonna put childcare on the bottom, can we help you with steps 1 through 3 on figuring out how many square feet that childcare should look like, where the rooms should be located, sort of save the developer and the architect a little bit of time and actually doing something that's well designed. Because many of you in this room may have seen childcare centers that are not necessarily as well designed. Yeah, why is it doing this? I designed a couple myself just in Alameda County, and I remember having to talk about tiny toilets a lot, right? Tiny toilets are really good for kids, and they're hard to, they're more expensive, but they're actually really important. They really honor the child and the fact that a child is small. Sometimes a really big toilet is sort of scary. So, how do you do things like that? So We also did a land use study and report. I'm going to talk a minute about that. So the county manager, the CEO of the county, really activated all of the cities to say, we really want this information. We want to grow the supply of childcare more. So, hey, Riverside and all the cities, incorporated cities in Riverside, we really want you to give us this information about your zoning rules, your fire code rules, your business permitting. What does it really take to open up a childcare program? Is it easy? Is it not easy? A lot of times it's not so easy. And some of that comes from the fact that a lot of local governments don't necessarily understand our sector and what it takes. And the fact that our sector is already highly regulated, but not necessarily by your local like planning commission. It's regulated by licensing or your local alternative payment agency or your Head Start program. And sometimes you might have 4 or 5 different regulating agencies coming in to like do everything from like checking what % milk you're serving to kids. So we did that, and those results have not formally been published yet, but every single city provided information. So we have really good information to kind of help compare with like, oh, this city's kind of got some barriers here. Maybe that they as a city might need to think about how they can make help remove some of those barriers to increase the supply of childcare in their community. We've also found this when we worked with Atlanta, and I just wanted to say I spoke with Sheba during the break, and she told me that her sister is a childcare center provider in Atlanta, and she got a grant from us. So I love the connection. I didn't know that ahead of time. But in Atlanta, we were finding that family childcare providers were really getting the runaround. They were said, no, go to this department. You need to go to this department. They would go to that department. No, go to this department. Like, our people in our sector, they don't need that. They don't need all that extra run around. We need to have them open their programs, start serving children, and not get a lot of, barriers. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm just going to have you read this, but you can see like there are a lot of barriers, and it's important to think in a fast-growing county like San Bernardino, and Riverside, how can we, how can you think about addressing some of those barriers to make it easier rather than more difficult to sustain and grow the supply of childcare? So you can see the 100% completion rate with all the cities. That's the cover of the report, which should be released soon in the next few months. And we really want to make sure that facilities are part of the equation as you build communities. So we also want to get to those planners, people who work in communities in the planning offices, and thinking like, oh, how do we include childcare? Because a lot of times you plan for schools, you plan for parks, you plan for roads, you plan for hospitals, but there isn't really a good systematic way to plan for childcare. And a lot of times it gets shoehorned in at the end when the community is almost always built out. So how are we including childcare systematically in emergency response, as we build these community resources for our families? Next slide. So this is just one example, but you can see that over 50% of the jurisdictions require large family childcare homes to obtain a permit for fire department clearance. And fire department is often a big barrier. They might ask a program to do what they call like a hard sprinkler, like hard wiring sprinklers throughout the entire home, which can be very cost prohibitive. So these are just some of the things. It's kind of wonky, but it often can be really important and cost prohibitive. So this is an example of something that we have done in Riverside. Okay, next slide. So this is also just an example. We can do a deep dive, figuring out like what is the landscape of childcare look like. So policymakers and elected officials can figure out, how do we actually allocate some funding and resources to help support this? All right, next slide. Go ahead to the next slide. This is just like, where are our actual childcare programs looking to expand, and where are we working to expand them? When I say we, it's First 5 Riverside is doing a lot of this. And you can see that there are 6 new ECE facilities co-located with affordable housing in districts 2 and 4. And I wanted to say, so the other thing that I told you is that the governor allocated $350 million, the largest fund of its kind in the country, to repair, renovate, and grow new early care and education facilities. That sounds like a lot of money. It's not even close to being enough. And I have a couple of statistics about San Bernardino here. They might be on one of these slides, but if they're not, I'm going to tell you. So we expected about 1,500 applications statewide. We got 5,100 applications for repair and renovation. We got 191 in San Bernardino, worth about $16 million of repairs and renovations. And we were able to serve 118 of them. So 97 home-based programs and 21 center-based programs that got, for example, like this family childcare provider I just visited, a new floor. She was able to replace a bathroom and replace many of the appliances and cabinets in her kitchen. If you can imagine running your home-based childcare program for 20 years, children in it continuously, 5 days a week, 20 years, the amount of use that kitchen will get. So it was really time for her to replace some of those things. And then for round 2, which is just rolling out, we had 83 applications in San Bernardino, but we were only able to actually fund 9. So we have 6 home-based programs. Those are programs that are large family childcare expanding to centers, and then 3 center-based programs. So you can just see there's a huge need. So one of my calls to action is to really advocate to the state and state elected leaders that we need more funding for childcare facilities so we can repair, renovate, and grow childcare, family childcare as well as centers. Next slide. So I wanted to just talk for a minute about childcare and housing, because at LIF we do both of these things. And just like housing, you want housing to be affordable, adequate, available, and accessible. Same with childcare. And we know that it's rarely any of these things. I really heard Sheba say, I had a kid and that I was so excited, and then I was like, oh no, did I make a mistake? Because when you look at the price tag, it's so unaffordable. And, I deeply feel like, we don't think about this for first grade. How are we going to pay for first grade? Our kids just get first grade, but they should do the same for childcare. I really believe childcare should be a public good, and we need to, try to work to have our legislators get there and understand that, at the federal, state, and local level. Next slide. So co-location, I wanted to say a little bit about a project that we have in Coachella that we had been working on. There's an initiative called Lift to Rise where they're really trying to reduce the rent burden. A lot of low-income families, they don't have affordable housing, but they decided that they wanted to sort of link childcare along with housing. And they said for all the new housing units that we build, we want 40% of them to be co-located with childcare. And I thought that was a great goal, of course, because I think about childcare all day long, but because it really means that you're trying to meet more than one family need. It's not just about housing, it's also about childcare. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is a project that we also did in San Diego about co-locating that. So we can also look at it from a specific county perspective. Like, what does this look like in San Diego County? We also did something for the state of Oregon. So, we think that sometimes there are disincentives for developers, and they're like, no, it's too expensive. We're not going to build childcare. It's one of the reasons childcare often doesn't get built. So, we're kind of trying to chip away at that. Let's go to the next slide, which I think might almost be the last one. Yeah, so I wanted to just mention the Brighter Future Fund, and I was talking to Sheba a little bit about this. One of the advantages to being a financial institution is that we talk to a lot of banks, and we got Goldman Sachs interested through their 1 Million Black Women initiative to give us sort of better capital, so debt. If a family childcare provider or a childcare center wanted to open a program, they could get below cost capital to finance their childcare program. So. I know a lot of the times grant money is the best, but that's not always available. So this is a way to really ensure that we can increase the supply of care where we want it. So that's some of the work that LIFT does, but I also wanted to say something about the work that I used to do in Alameda County. One of the last things I did before I left that position was work on a ballot measure called, it was originally called Measure A, then called Measure C. It took 6 years, 6 long years, but I worked really closely with the union, and I worked really closely with a parent group called Parent Voices, and really closely with First Five and the Board of Supervisors. I was working for the county at the time, and we worked to get this ballot measure passed, and it finally passed. And actually tomorrow, First Five, who will be administering that funding, is bringing the plan to spend some of that money to the First Five Commission. It is raising $150 million a year just for early care and education. So it will create 20, I don't know how many, but back when I was working on it, like 20,000 scholarships. So more funding. You know, as James was saying, we cleared our waiting list and we immediately got 15,000 new kids on the waiting list. Well, it could address something like that. It also will raise wages for the people doing the amazing women doing the work. It would put money toward facilities and improve quality. This took, I would say for me and a lot of the folks working in the county at the time, many, many years of realizing it was just, we were just putting Band-Aids on a very, very, very large wound, and we needed to do something really big. So I'd love for you all to think about what that could mean in a community like the Inland Empire that has a lot of need, and hope that you reach out if you need anything, or want just like I've been there, done that. Happy to talk more about it, but I just appreciate being here today, talking a little bit about the work that we're doing, and hope that you leave today renewed with energy to go out and change the situation in your community. Thank you.
Didn't I say we would talk about solutions, not just the problem? So what I'm hoping that we can close today, thank you so much, Angie, for all of that amazing information. And we didn't even know, you didn't know that you were going to learn about some additional income sources that you can tap into. So I'm hoping between all of our notes, and we have been taking notes throughout this conversation, we are going to share these notes back out with everyone who is attending today, because the idea is not to just leave it at conversation. We want a call to action. And something that Angie mentioned that I wanted to highlight, and it's not just because I'm part of the Labor Institute, but if you have a local union, and you all do, that you can reach out to when you are talking about what the possibilities are, potential programs, utilize your union brothers and sisters in the region as a resource. Not only do they have experience with organizing folks and getting people together, they also have tons of information to share about what other unions are doing across the region to innovate around this space. Okay, so there are multiple models that we can kind of look at. I would love to workshop all of those with you, and hopefully this conversation doesn't end here. But thank you again so much for coming out and spending this time with us, and at least starting this conversation. We have left a QR code on each of your tables. If you don't see it, maybe ask someone. They're hoarding it a little bit, and just ask them to pass it on. If you scan that code, because this event is part of Thrive Inland SoCal, or supported by Thrive Inland SoCal, and because that investment initiative, it's so important to them that they get as many voices as possible, you can be reimbursed for spending this time with us, okay? Because that's how much we value your voice. So please take a moment to scan that code and fill that out so that you can, again, get your gift card for coming out today. And we hope that you visit our website, IELI, at ielaborinstitute.org. And we hope to connect with you in the future. Go forth and have a wonderful afternoon. Pick up those kids.